Good afternoon, everyone. It's David Schlotthauer here, and welcome back to another detailed tropical weather update for Tuesday, August the 20th, 2024. So here's a look at the very latest GOES 16 True Color Visible Satellite Imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com. There will be a link in the description below this video. So as we do take a look at the entire Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and the Western Atlantic, right now looking very quiet, of course. There is Ernesto exiting the picture, just about to do so in the next hour or two, and we're left with a lot of quiet conditions. And you're wondering, when are the tropics going to get hyperactive potentially? Well, it doesn't look like now until very late August into September, and I'll show you some evidence here in a bit on that. But right now we have the big monsoon gyre out here in the Western African continent, coming off and even impacting the Cabo Verde Islands, or Cape Verde Islands, I should say. And we have some deep convection at times, but there's just so much of this dry air, folks, that is getting in the way of these waves. And also, these waves are coming off at a much northerly latitude. Here's one right here. Look how far north this actually is. And so they're ingesting a lot of Saharan dust. The air is extremely dry and stable, and that is why we are not seeing anything developing here on the models just yet. But there are changes coming, and possibly even some big changes coming. But right now in the Gulf, in the Caribbean, and much of the Atlantic, looking nice and quiet for the time being. Also, I thought it would be really cool to show you all Tropical Storm Gilma here in the Eastern Pacific getting sheared apart by some northeasterly shear that is plaguing the system and offsetting the vortex. So we have a lot of deep convection to the southwest of the low-level center, as you can see here on the visible, some of those low-level clouds spinning just to the northeast of where all the deep convection is. But Gilma is likely to really undergo some explosive intensification, only briefly, before it encounters cooler waters. Something cool that I just wanted to show you all briefly. Now, the rest of the video, we will be talking about the Atlantic, because there is a big signal coming for the tropics to really get active out there, and we really need to be paying very close attention right now. So looking at the latest 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida, we got to get a big round of applause to these people that make these updates possible as often as every 3 hours, or even every hour, when we have a major hurricane or some kind of hurricane about to make landfall. So a big round of applause does go to the National Hurricane Center, all the people that work there at making these graphics for us. So here is Ernesto up here about to exit the image. This is probably going to be the last advisory on Ernesto from the National Hurricane Center, as this is no longer barely on the map. And down here in the deep tropics, looking nice and quiet for right now. I want to emphasize that for right now, but we see a big signal coming. And then, of course, in the Caribbean, nice and quiet. And in the Gulf, nice and quiet, which is only going to add fuel to the fire, because the sea surface temperatures are really warming up in a hurry there still. Looking at the Eastern Pacific here, only briefly here, we can see there is Tropical Storm Gilma with winds 50 to 60 miles an hour. We have an area to watch right here in orange. This has a 40% chance of tropical development. And then over here in red, we have another area to watch that could threaten Hawaii. We won't talk much about this at all today, because we talked about it in yesterday's video. This has an 80% chance of tropical development in the next 7 days. So now the question that you all are asking is, when are the tropics going to get supposedly active? Everyone has been expecting a hyperactive season, or a very active one nevertheless here, based on our agencies. So the answer to that is potentially as early as the 27th or the 28th of August is what I'm still thinking, and especially by early September is when we expect the development to really explode in intensity and in coverage as well. So this is a look at the GFS 850 millibar geopotential height, cyclonic vorticity in shaded colors, and the winds in the low levels. These are the wind barbs, so kind of illustrating this really quickly. There's your wind barbs. Here are your height lines in black. So this kind of gives us a topographical map of where our ridges are and where our troughs are in the low levels. And this color shading is what we look for. And there is Dorian, the footprint left. Not Dorian. Oh my gosh, getting my words mixed up. The footprint left behind Ernesto now an open wave. So that's why it's now post-tropical instead of being still tropical or extratropical. So now let's see what happens here over the next several days on the GFS, the Global Forecasting System. And we can see nothing to talk about over the next 5 days. So if you're going to the Caribbean, if you're doing any snorkeling, if you're going on a cruise liner, or if you're going hiking anywhere on vacation, looks pretty good in the Caribbean. All thumbs up for those people that want to go. No impacts to your travel or anything to speak of, other than we might have some pop-up showers and thunderstorms, diurnal thunderstorms because of surface heating, but that's really about it. That's what you're going to only see. All right, because there's a lot of dry air out there. But we can see as we go forward in the next 10 days, still looking good. But now I caution you here, this is beyond the time when I expect something to develop in the tropics. Probably might even have to wait a little later, maybe even the 29th perhaps at this point. But if we go back and look at a couple of model runs, so more so last night on the 0Z run, we had this system developing out here in the western main development region or in the central main development region, impacting perhaps maybe the Caribbean. Now, this is one model run, so don't freak out. And then there was additional storms coming off of, say, Africa. Now, if we just kind of play through the 0Z run here, we can see how that system does try to develop. But then look what the GFS does. Look what it does in the first couple of days of September. Things really explode. All right. This is why we don't like to look at deterministic models very often. Once I try to do this at least in every video. That's because, well, we got to look at the forecast. Ensembles give us signals, and the GFS model gives us guidance. So in other words, this is telling me, all right, so if we circle in all of these areas, so let me turn this off so I can show you all. So when we circle these in right here on the 0Z run, this is giving me an illustration right here that the background state, everything is coming together for a huge increase in activity. You just cannot look at this and be like, oh, there's a storm in the Gulf. Oh my gosh, we got to get prepared. Oh my gosh, there's a storm heading into the Caribbean. We got to get prepared. This is only one model, by the way, and this is really far out. This is, come on, the 4th of September. We're not even in September yet, and we're still almost in the middle of August. So this is really far out in time. So I caution anyone looking at these models and thinking, oh, we're going to have a big barrage of activity. The GFS model is model guidance, and it's not a forecast, because if it was an accurate forecast, then we would be pretty concerned about this. Now, when we look at the 06Z model run, where did those other 4 systems go? Well, they disappeared. Instead, now we have a major hurricane headed into perhaps maybe Bermuda again. Bermuda threat, maybe an eastern seaboard threat, because if we go back and look here, you can see it is pretty much moving in this general direction right here. But that's only one model run, right? So this is giving us a clue that things are about to get active, but we're not going to track any individual by itself storm, any singular system, because that's just kind of I would be wasting my time at fear mongering, and we don't want to do that here. So basically treat this as signals and not anywhere as like, oh, we have a major hurricane on this model. Let's see where it goes next when it updates the next time, because it won't be there. I guarantee you that system won't exist, or may exist somewhere else. Here is the 12Z run, and look at this. Where did it go? Where did it go? You may be asking. It's gone. It's gone. So there are signals still, and we will see what the 18Z run, what the 0Z run shows this afternoon into the evening hours to see if things have uptrended again. But prepare for some activity by early September or the last couple of days or two of August. Now, remember those signals that I was talking about here on the vorticity map on the deterministic GFS model? Well, here's a look at it from an ensemble perspective, and still, this is the 06Z run. We are still waiting for our 12Z run to come out. I will actually show that in just a second if it has gotten done running through, because it runs behind the deterministic forecast, so it's slightly delayed. But we can see here there is a definite formidable signal out there for at least a tropical storm, maybe a low-grade hurricane, as it moves generally towards the west-northwest. Right now, I don't see any impacts yet to the Caribbean, but, you know, until something develops, like always, things could shift further south than further north. And anyone living in the Caribbean really needs to be paying close attention for late August into early September. Probably the first week of September is when I think we're going to see just an explosion of activity. And of course, in the Gulf of Mexico, too, we're seeing a few members there that are popping up here on the Ensemble. So I just checked the GEFS Ensemble for the 12Z, and it is only halfway through its rendering cycle. So unfortunately, in this video, we won't be able to show you that latest Ensemble forecast, but nevertheless, this will have to do the trick because I do work today at 12:45 until 4:45, and I decided that I'll make a video this morning anyways. So this will be out pretty early this afternoon. But on the side note of that, here's a look at the European Ensemble prediction system, all 51 members that run the Ensemble forecast, and we can see there is definitely a formidable signal here too on the Euro. We're starting to see a lot more tropical storm tracks, so there's these blue lines, these red lines too, indicating more predictability here. The chances are significantly higher than they were just 2 days ago when we were barely talking about anything out here. So definitely the signal is definitely growing for some big time activity in the tropical Atlantic for early September. And again, this is just a signal and not an actual forecast. Don't freak out when you see some of these red lines showing, oh my gosh, 950 millibars, as low as that. That's a major hurricane. Please do not focus on any individual member because one member is not a deterministic forecast. It's a range of possible outcomes is basically what this is. The European model renders 51 different times with slightly different initial conditions to give out a different outcome. So that's what this basically illustrates. So I'm not concerned. Do not be concerned that, oh my gosh, we got a major hurricane getting close to Jamaica or towards the Haitian Peninsula, because that is pretty much your witch casting at this point. If you do predict a major hurricane, any of you that watch this video, not trying to be rude, but trying to make you all aware that ensembles are signals, not an actual super duper hyper duper accurate forecast. But in the meantime, you know what you need to be concerned about is how warm the Gulf of Mexico actually is. This is getting beyond ridiculous. I mean, I don't say that very often, but these waters are pretty alarming. I mean, I've not seen, and I'm not trying to do this to get views, to fearmonger, to grab everyone's attention. Please don't think that. In my 5 years of tracking the tropics, I have ever seen sea surface temperatures like this in the northern Gulf of Mexico being as warm as, say, 32, 33 Celsius. I mean, we are reaching the 90 to 93 degree Fahrenheit range. That is at least 10 to 13 degrees above what you need even for a tropical storm or hurricane to develop in. So in other words, this is more than favorable. I mean, in a thermodynamic standpoint, on sea surface temperatures in the Gulf, way overly favorable for explosive, intense hurricanes if everything else in the atmosphere is able to come together. Also, the Bay of Youth here in the western Cuban area, very warm. I mean, 33 Celsius. That is off the charts. That is way over here. If you look at my legend down here, 33 plus Celsius. In fact, I would not be surprised if there's even a 33.5 Celsius isotherm down in here near the island of Youth. So yeah, things are just asking for trouble down the road. Once we get into the second half of September is when I think we're going to start getting more Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean development, is what I truly believe. It could happen sooner. It may not happen when I see it happen. But either way, everyone in the Gulf Coast, all right, you definitely need to be extra prepared just in case if there is a tropical wave out there or a tropical storm that kind of drifts into the Gulf here, because you know what has happened in the past. We saw Michael rapidly intensified. We saw, what else? Ian really explosively intensify. We saw Laura, Sally. We saw, oh my gosh, I can name several more out there that were really intense. Most famously, Katrina. I mean, the thing was only a tropical depression here and then just became a Cat 5 once it made landfall somewhere over here in basically the panhandle of Florida. So in other words, the Gulf is more than ready to go. Do not underestimate this at all, because the entire Gulf now has water temperatures greater than 88 to 89 Fahrenheit, which is more than warm enough to support intense, violent hurricanes. If they do develop, if they do, I cannot stress it enough, if they develop. So sea surface temperature anomalies definitely well above average in the Gulf. So there's no problem with that, right? We're definitely above climatology as far as where we need to be with sea surface temperatures, definitely above that. And then of course down here in the Bay of Youth, sea surface temperatures are just outrageous. I mean, some of these areas down here in the purple, that is 3 degrees above average. That is pretty formidable if you think about it. All right, so in other words, everything's just, the atmosphere just has to respond to that. I mean, we got to decrease the wind shear, we got to get rid of the dry air, and these tropical waves have to come off at a much lower latitude off of Africa. And what I mean by that is these tropical waves have to develop down here. The surface wave has to come off like this, or even maybe a little bit further north would do the trick as well. All you need to do is not have the waves come off here like we're seeing. Look, see that little circulation right there? This is punching in a lot of dry Saharan dust coming off of Africa, and that is why we're not seeing any development in these nimbostratus clouds out here in across most of the Atlantic. Do illustrate there's a lot of stable Saharan air above the moist boundary layer of the ocean. So in other words, just not favorable right now, but I've just showed you all there are big changes coming, all right? So now looking at the entire Atlantic as a whole with our sea surface temperature anomalies, boy, we took a big chunk out of upper ocean heat content and sea surface temperatures over Bermuda. Look at that. That is basically the track where Hurricane Ernesto went through. You can really get an idea. It went kind of like this. I would not be surprised if we kind of chunk or hunker down on some of these well above average sea surface temperatures. And I'm telling you, with cold temperatures up here, colder than average off of Greenland. Why do they call it Greenland and it's a white ice cap? I don't know. But you get the idea, right? And all of the heat is being stored down here in lower latitudes. And I'm telling you, once the light switch flips on, in other words, I did my car analogy yesterday. Everyone really liked that. It's kind of like putting in the key into your ignition and trying to start your car and it just won't turn over, right? Once that car turns over and the engine is idling, you just once it gets going, it doesn't stop. It really won't stop, and we're just gonna see a parade. And who knows? And people might think I'm fear mongering here. We could see even 4 or 5 named storms, even 6 named storms at a time, for all we know, in the month of September. And my prediction, let alone for September, is calling for 9 to 16 named storms, just alone in the month of September, perhaps. All right, now, don't freak out when you hear the 16. There's a wide range of possible outcomes, but I'm just telling you, the later this waits, the more we have to pack into the hurricane season, and it's not going to end well. I have a concern about that. Sea surface temperatures down here are very warm, and of course the Caribbean and the Gulf just outrageously warm, so not a problem there. And when we look at the sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic, definitely really warm out there, ready to go. And I mentioned this to my friend Ethan B yesterday when we were on a call, and he even agrees with me. Sea surface temperatures here in the northern Gulf. All right, let's go back to that image here. In the northern Gulf and even the Bay of Youth, are actually the warmest in the entire world, okay, because when I looked at some of the sea surface temperature maps in India and in the Western Pacific, they were only reaching about 31 to 32 degrees Celsius. So when you think about it, 32.5 to 33 Celsius, and even 33.5 down here in the Bay of Youth in Western Cuba, that is warmer than the entire world with its warmest sea surface temperature. So in other words, we are dominating much of the world with our warm sea surface temperatures here in the Gulf and in the Caribbean as well. So yeah, it's just not good, not good. This on top of a very favorable background state. Again, once those waves get further south, the intertropical convergence zone where these tropical waves develop off of, once that gets further south, and I'll bet you $50 if I have to, by early September, we are going to see a lot of tropical development, perhaps coming off of Africa here. Because you can see here, all this upward motion, all of this background state is just there. It's ready to go. And don't kind of get fooled by all this sinking air, all this red and orange that you see. And you can see that's over the Caribbean and over most of the Atlantic. Please do not get fooled by that, because that does not mean that we won't see tropical development. You can tell by, if you go to actually Twitter, and actually I will do that. I will cite this person because he is actually really awesome. Eric Webb made a really good kind of illustration on this. So if we actually zoom in and kind of scroll down here, we can see that if we look at the Mercator projection here, the most favorable conditions in the Atlantic are actually when the MJO is over basically the maritime continent, including the Indian Ocean, and not necessarily over Africa. So keep that in mind. Just because you see sinking motion in the Atlantic does not mean that, oh, it's not going to be very active, David. You're hyping this up. All right, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. But if I'm right, that's a bad thing, because that's when we'll see a lot of activity. So let me see if I could find one more. Here is the post that I've been wanting to show you all, just to illustrate with what I showed you on the Hofmoeller diagram. So basically this is basically the same thing as this. So this was posted about a few days, actually about a little over a week ago, I'm thinking right here. This is, yeah, for August the 2nd. But it's kind of up to current here. Just another annual reminder that the Atlantic tends to be most active when the descending phase of the MJO is entering the basin, like it will be in late August, maybe the 25th-ish this year. We're not there yet, still 5 days away. Probably more like the 28th or the 29th is when it will actually happen now, based on our model guidance. The impacts of low deep layer wind shear, reduced SAL intrusions, which is the Saharan air layer that we've talked about, the dry, dusty air coming off of Africa, enhanced low-level relative vorticity from westerly wind anomalies, accumulative column water vapor in the preceding active phase, and the lagged effect of the stronger African easterly waves moving out of the Atlantic are all more important than the local vertical motion anomalies, especially near the peak of hurricane season. So in other words, that despite all of this sinking motion, the Atlantic is really going to come to life. And that's what some of the models are beginning to indicate. So just because you see sinking motion, don't ever think that is good news. I wish it was good news. I wish we would not have all this activity, but unfortunately, the Atlantic is going to wake up from its brief slumber. So I want to give a big round of applause to Eric Webb at providing that. You are a really awesome guy at providing all the MJO details for us to look at and to extrapolate this to my viewers. So thank you all for that. Eric Webb, you are awesome, and I can't wait to see what you have more to post on Twitter. But otherwise, if you guys did enjoy today's detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Tuesday, August the 20th, 2024, please don't forget to hit the red subscribe button. You have to subscribe to the channel to get latest updates, to get latest live streams, latest blog posts, and everything you need to know about the tropics. And of course, hopefully in early October, if I could fit in time for it, I will be releasing my next winter forecast For a lot of you that want to see my second one to come out, I did a lot of tweaking on the snow map, and I cannot wait to share it with you all. So that will be released hopefully in very late September or early October. But anyways, I'll be back with you more tomorrow with another update on the tropics.